everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Divorce and Separation Coach podcast. Today, we're talking about family mediation, but in particular, hybrid mediation. And I think a lot of you will have heard about family mediation. It's definitely gaining in popularity as one of the options to resolve your divorce disputes out of court. But what a lot of people don't realize is that mediation can take so many different shapes and sizes, and it can really adapt in a lot of flexible ways to your specific situation. So today we're talking about hybrid mediation, and I've invited Charlotte Symes. Charlotte is a family solicitor, but also an accredited mediator and a collaborative practitioner at Family Law and Partnership. Charlotte mediates clients on all kinds of issues, from finances to children. Through her sessions, Charlotte uses a variety of different options, whether it's traditional mediation or shuttle mediation, which we'll explain in a minute, or any kind of hybrid format, both online and in person. Many of Charlotte's clients are international clients, and she has a lot of expertise and experience understanding the importance of the cultural interplay that takes place with regards to the expectations that people bring to family mediation. Charlotte, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
So I'm looking forward to hearing a lot more about hybrid mediation because it's a term we hear a lot these days, and it seems to capture a lot of different things. So could you explain to us what hybrid mediation refers to, and especially how it's different to the traditional approach to family mediation?
Yeah. So just to kind of quick recap, because I think it's important to sort of go through all the different options. So you've got mediation, which is always a private, confidential, out of court process. And hybrid mediation is a combination of the family and the commercial mediation models. So traditional family mediation, we've got one room, there's generally a mediator, two clients, and you have sessions which are, as I say, confidential. Sometimes you can bring lawyers into those meetings as well. Sometimes you might bring other professionals in. And then those sessions can be in what we call shuttle format as well, which is what you touched on. So that's where the clients will actually be in two separate rooms and the mediator moves between the two. And again, all those sessions can be in person, they can be online. So really what the key difference with all of that and the hybrid mediation is this idea of the mediator holding confidences. So in the traditional model, you've got complete transparency between the two clients and the mediator.
Yeah.
In the hybrid mediation model, because you've got the mediator moving between the two rooms, so it's always that sort of shuttle format.
Yeah.
But the mediator can be in the room with the lawyers and the client and sort of listen in or participate in that discussion. And then that won't be shared with the other client and their team. So it's quite a unique sort of vantage point that mediator has. And I think, that works really, really well because they can be, in each room, as I say, not, between the two rooms, but in each room, it can be a very, very open discussion. And that's really, the sort of the main point about hybrid mediation.
Difference is that you would have a lawyer with you, but it would always be shuttle. So you would always have both sides of the dispute in different places.
Yes. And so, I mean, I guess, sometimes it can be flexible. So I've had clients who are concerned about costs, and you might then say, well, look, the lawyers don't have to be physically present in all the sessions, so they could be available on the phone, or maybe we do a few sessions without them there, and then they come for the one, where we're talking about outcomes and proposals. So, again, you can work depending on what's best for each client situation. So there's no, it's no hard and fast rule, but yes, generally speaking, you can have your lawyers there, and people find that quite supportive.
And so in that case, what happens if one of the two doesn't want to have their lawyers, trying to save money or whatnot? Can you still do it if only one of the two brings a lawyer?
I would say it's best to agree the ground rules because everyone really needs to do the same thing. I think once you start having one rule for one person, one rule for the other, as a mediator, I prefer to keep it really balanced and sort of maybe asking, well, why is that? What are the reasons behind that? And maybe there is a compromise. So maybe you can have your lawyers, as I say, not physically there and just available on the phone, and one person might call their lawyer at all, and one person might do it, have them live on the phone the whole time. So access to your lawyer is crucial. You don't have to use your lawyer, but I like to sort of, when I'm setting the mediation up, I like it, either to have both lawyers there, or both online, or not at all.
That makes sense. And I've had that because I've attended a few mediation sessions with clients over the years.
Yeah.
And in a lot of cases, the mediator asks for there to be a coach on both sides. They're not very comfortable if one of the two has a coach and the other doesn't. And it's always with this idea of keeping it balanced. And so is the idea then that the lawyers are present throughout? And do they actually draft the order or the settlement at that moment? Or does it all get
Yeah,
settled there and then?
that's what's kind of amazing about how effective and efficient it can be in hybrid mediation, is that you can, get to the point where you've got an agreement, and maybe I suppose, rather than the traditional model where clients want to go and run something past their lawyer before, finalizing it. You always say nothing is legally binding until
Yeah.
you've lodged your consent order. But yes, certainly, having the lawyers there means that drafting can be done, and sometimes that can be really, really, good way to make the most of the time.
Yeah.
Equally, if people want a bit of cooling off period, then that's really important as well. I think
Yeah.
it's sometimes people could feel a bit railroaded if it's been a long day, and sometimes it can be a day, sometimes it might be just a few hours. But yes, having lawyers there is generally a very, very efficient way of getting it to the point that people need it to get to.
Yeah, and I can see the value if they want to be able to move on quickly, to be able
Yeah,
to have it drafted there and then would be really helpful.
for sure.
And so are there any specific scenarios where hybrid mediation works particularly well? And I'm thinking in particular when there's sort of a high conflict case or just, communication is very hostile between the two parties.
Yeah, I mean, I think, that is most commonly where people are drawn to the process, although it is available to everyone.
Yeah,
I do think, yeah, as a mediator, I'm always talking to people about the different mediation options open to them. And what I don't want is to force two people into a room who can't be in the room together, and that's fine, but it's just not the right process for them. And then in that situation, rather than being able to have the conversation about the topics we need to, it's all about the
yeah,
atmosphere. So what they can do is it just takes the pressure off, and as well as, I think, the shuttle format to some extent addresses the high conflict.
yeah,
I also think then having the lawyers present is sort of further supports people. And I think this idea of, just having another sounding board and kind of bouncing ideas can be really, really important where there's high conflict.
yeah.
Maybe someone else, you know, forcing their client, the lawyer asking the question about what might the other person be perceiving, in that scenario, and just sort of, challenging them a little bit.
Yeah.
And then this, as I say, this idea of the mediator holding confidences can be really, really powerful. And I've seen that both when I'm the mediator and I'm able to be in each room and create a real rapport with each of the client. And I think there's just, when clients know there is transparency that applies above all else, there is always a level of communication that you can't really go past. It has to be quite boundary. Whereas actually in that room, people can be quite honest. You hear what people's real fears are and hear what they might be willing to compromise on. And that's just so useful as the mediator. I've
You
also,
help them find an agreement.
yeah, exactly. And I think you're just learning a bit more about the individuals involved, which, and understanding where they're coming from, which is so crucial.
So at what stage do people need to decide if they want to do hybrid mediation? Can they change halfway through having started with a traditional mediation, or do they have to decide up front? How does that work?
So generally speaking, you would sign up front because it's a slightly different agreement to mediate. That is, I've never had it where people have changed halfway through, but in theory, I
Okay.
suppose they could. And you would just need to be really, really clear that as I say, about the confidentiality rules are different. So
Yeah.
this idea of holding confidences, but in theory, that there's no reason why you couldn't change. But it would just, everyone needs to really understand the parameters. But I think,
Okay.
all of this shows that it is very, very flexible. So,
Yeah.
sometimes you might start off in one room, then decide shuttle's better. Then you might bring in the lawyers for a few sessions. As you mentioned, you might then bring in your divorce coaches for a few sessions. You might bring in financial planners, pension experts. You can sort of flex the process as you need to, which,
Yeah.
compared to your process is quite transformative.
And so what role does the lawyer actually play in the room? How does it help with finding an agreement?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I think, and actually, what I didn't mention is that another difference is that in hybrid mediation, you'll have this professionals meeting. So the first step in all mediation is to have an individual meeting with your
Yeah.
mediator. And that's really just to, assess whether it's the right process. In hybrid mediation, you then have a professionals meeting. So that's with the
Yeah.
mediator and the two solicitors. And that's just to check that everyone's on the same page and that the lawyers are going to behave and, be conciliatory and think about being solutions focused, reaching a compromise. It's not about, going into the hybrid mediation and having an evidence-based discussion. It's not about right and
Yeah.
wrong. Um, and I think that really sets the scene. And then in the hybrid sessions, the solicitors will be giving ongoing and legal advice. And they can do that when the mediator's in the room because of the confidences. They will be there to maybe tell the client what their best and worst case scenario is, maybe what will happen if they go to court. Usually the mediator will be saying, okay, well, what are your costs going to be if you don't reach an agreement today?
Yeah.
So there's a bit of reality checking that goes on, I think, as well as support and the lawyer saying, well, look, actually, I think that, sounds like a really, a sort of good compromise or not, and just
Yeah.
think about things that the client hasn't spoken about. I suppose the lawyer's also there as a kind of cross check. So if something's been missed, it means that you don't then have to go back into the mediation. You can, make it a very, very comprehensive discussion and make the most of the time and obviously money as well.
Do all sorts of lawyers, I mean, all kinds of family lawyers can join hybrid mediation, or do you have to have a special qualification or training to be able to participate?
Yeah, so there is a resolution course which is run by the main, resolution is our main body of training. So that's a really amazing course. But I know that, there are other, as I say, similar to the civil commercial style of mediation. So there are other, people who train with other bodies as well. But yes, it's, it is quite a specific type of mediation. It is slightly different to the traditional models. So it, takes a bit of getting used to, but the core skills for a mediator are there.
Yeah.
It's a variation on that process. So yeah, and I think, any client looking to do hybrid mediation would want to speak to the mediator they have in mind and check whether they offer that as a service.
How about with their lawyer? Does every kind of lawyer, are they all able to participate in hybrid mediation? Or is there, again, you need to look for a certain profile if you're interested?
Yeah, in theory, any lawyer could support a client through hybrid mediation. I think
Okay.
that probably, it highlights the importance of that professionals meeting because you really want to make sure that, as a mediator, you want to know that the lawyers are engaged in that process. So I would say it's more about the approach of the lawyer and their willingness to sort of commit to the process and, champion it rather than, yeah, there's no bar. You don't have to do a special course as a solicitor to support a client through it. So it should be something that, when a client goes and sees a solicitor and they're talking about all the out of court process options, it should be something that they're able to discuss.
Yeah, I was going to say actually, in selecting your lawyer, if you have a specific inclination towards hybrid mediation, it would be
Yeah,
something to ask and to inquire about if they've got experience with that.
definitely. And part of, I think, the process working is yes, down to the client, but also down to everyone else's engagement. So the lawyer, needs to feel confident in that process, needs to, be thinking that it's the right process for the client. And so having that conversation early on, if someone is interested in it, is definitely really, really important.
Right. And so, could you share with us? I know you can't share a specific story,
Mhm.
but an example of when hybrid mediation has worked particularly well in a way that maybe traditional mediation wouldn't have been able to,
Yeah.
and why it worked so well. Like, what were the factors that made it connect that time?
Yeah. So I think the one that sticks out in my mind is a case where there were two parents who couldn't decide which school to send their child to, and there was a deadline, so they had to put in their application. The local council wasn't going to wait for them, and the court wouldn't be able to offer them a court hearing for months. Although it was urgent. It wasn't urgent in the eyes of the court. The court is so overstretched anyway. And so what were their options? And it was high conflict. There was a deadline. And so they agreed to do hybrid mediation, and it was a full day, some preparation beforehand in terms of, the schools that were being considered. Um, and it worked really, really well because suddenly everyone felt relieved that it was at least going to get sorted out. And I think that took away a lot of the anxiety. I think part of the high conflict was about the fact that, court applications were being thrown around, and, there was just no guarantee it was going to get sorted in time. And then there was obviously a child involved, which is
Yeah.
so important to remember, is that, this was going to really impact on the child if that application was going to be missed completely. And so talking it through, throughout the day and supported with their lawyers, they were able to reach an agreement. And I think they both surprised themselves, actually, that, there were areas that they did agree. And actually, it was a wider discussion in the end. It was about child arrangements and, perhaps fear of reducing time. And so there was a much wider conversation. It wasn't just about the school. It was about how much, where this child was going to live, and a lot of the practicalities. So, that was just a really great example of how it can work well. And they got their agreement reached within, I think, 3 weeks of, having come to me. And, for the child to be told that, their parents had reached an agreement, I think it's just so powerful. So that was, yeah, that's a really, really good example. I think other ones that spring to mind are where there have been allegations of domestic abuse, because really the court process does not support those people well.
Right.
The time it takes, the environment, it almost sort of perpetuates the abuse
Yeah.
sometimes, I think. And you can make applications for special measures, but sometimes those screens aren't where they should be, or if it's online, it's quite hard to control the environment. You can't control people entering and exiting buildings, which you can do.
Yeah.
Um, and it just generally, I think, makes people feel that they've completely lost control even more than they did before. So
Yeah.
I've done hybrid mediations really, really successfully with clients with victims of domestic abuse. And I think the other thing is they can be supported by a domestic abuse expert, and during the mediation,
Yeah.
they can be supported by, the divorce coach or the therapist, or, whoever it needs to be there to make them feel empowered to make decisions. And then obviously they've got their lawyer there as well. So they're not going, maybe if there's a power imbalance, even that can be really critical,
Yeah.
making people feel supported. So I think that, that's why the process does work really, really well in those situations. And I think the other, example, actually, I was not the mediator in that situation. I was a solicitor in the hybrid mediation.
Okay.
This was a property dispute. So these two people who owned a property together, they actually just couldn't afford to make the claim in the court that they needed to, because there was a
Okay.
percentage of the value of the claim that they would have to pay as the court fee. So,
Mhm.
they really didn't know where to turn, and this ended up being a really, really good process for them. And actually, in that situation, I just saw the amazing relationship that the mediator created with my client, and presumably in the other room as well. And I think,
Yeah.
it's just, yeah, it is a very, in a skilled way, it's very powerful.
That's really what I love in what you're saying, is that it's so much more than just the idea that we typically have of mediation, sitting together in a room with a mediator. It really can be shaped in whatever way makes sense for your context, whether it's abuse, whether it's a time pressure, whatever,
Yeah.
you can make it work for yourself. And it's true that it takes you out of all of the administration that comes with going through the traditional court system
Yes,
there.
exactly. And I suppose it's also important to recognize that there are times where, a court application maybe has already been made or needs to be made just to set a court timetable. And sometimes people do need the rigor of those deadlines to do things. So mediation can work alongside a court process. I think some people don't realize that, and it's not used perhaps enough.
Right.
And
Yeah.
you could have, I don't know, a weekly mediation sessions probably before you're anywhere near a court hearing. So there's so
Yeah.
much time, and it doesn't, if someone I'd say to anyone listening, if your other half makes a court application, don't see it as the end of the world, because there's so much that can be done in the time before you get.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I was going to pick up on that in your very first example where you were saying they had a deadline with the school applications.
Yeah,
And actually, deadlines can be really helpful. I've had
yeah,
many clients over the years reach agreements, the day before the FDR, for example,
yeah, yeah,
because there's that pressure of the court hearing, and suddenly everybody kind of, is more willing to have a proper conversation and not let things go on forever. So that
yes.
can be actually a really useful tool as well in getting people to think a little bit outside the box and move away from their positions.
Yeah, I think that's right. And drift isn't good for anyone. And
No, agreed.
actually you're better off, yeah, going to court and at least getting an endpoint rather than,
Yeah,
see
going
some
on forever.
situations. Yeah, they go on for years, and that is just not good for anyone involved.
So you touched upon something earlier that I just want to pick up on where you were talking about preparation. So thinking
Mm.
about somebody who's thinking of hybrid mediation or about to embark in it, what kind of preparation is required to be able to enter that room, in the most efficient manner?
Yeah, so I think that's such an important question, because actually by the time you're in that room, they should be well prepared. And I think so many people aren't. I think
Hmm.
a lot of people see mediation as the whatever, whether it's hybrid or other forms of mediation, as the sort of easy, soft option. And it's really not. It's
Yeah,
really quite challenging. And I think it takes a lot of preparation to do it well.
yeah,
So I would say, that's the most important thing. And I think it's quite easy for us lawyers to say, oh, well, why don't you give mediation a go and then come back and see me? Well, without sort of really talking through what that's going to be like.
yeah,
And certainly when I trained as a mediator, it was quite transformative for me to be in that space and actually feel that
yeah,
I can really prepare clients well for it. So yeah, I would say, whether if it's a financial issue, then you need to have exchanged financial disclosure. You need to have all of the information gathering done beforehand.
yeah,
And that, needs to be managed either by the lawyers or or with the mediator, but that's really, really important. And it's no less, the bar is no less high than it is in the court process. So as people shouldn't feel that, oh, I'm not sure I'm going to go into mediation because I need the court to direct things. Well, that may be true, but you do expect full and frank financial disclosure in mediation. So I think that's really important. But then I think also the mindset, your willingness, are you willing to compromise? Are you
yeah,
listen? This isn't
yeah,
going to be about evidence-based conversations. No one's interested in your witness statements or who said what, who's right or wrong. Don't expect to come in and feel like you've won. Actually feel like, okay, well, was that a workable solution you can live with? That is probably a good outcome in mediation because it's something both
exactly.
want to stick to. So I think there's a lot of mental preparation that needs to go on. And I think that kind of leads on to the therapeutic side of things as well, because at Flip, we always, encourage clients to have therapeutic support. Maybe they've already got a therapist, or maybe they meet with one of our in-house therapists, or maybe they're working with you or in a divorce coaching. Just someone who is going to work on confidence building and sort of mental preparation at the very least, to get into the headspace of then being able to make practical decisions. I really notice the difference between the clients that have that therapeutic support or have a divorce coach, someone who's working with them, and in terms of their mental preparation, and then those that aren't, and then I'm asking them to make practical decisions, which are hugely impacting on their life, and it's a lot. And I
Yeah.
think people need to recognize it's just such a challenging time.
Yeah, and it is ultimately a negotiation. A lot of the work I do with my clients is helping them to prepare for that negotiation.
Yeah,
Ideally through mediation, but it could be through other avenues as well.
yeah.
And knowing what to expect is really important. I have a lot of clients who expect the mediator to take sides. I think they're a judge, and so just understanding
Mhm.
really that it is a neutral party. Because you hear people expressing fears like, the mediator's going to side with my ex because he or she's very charming or whatever it might be,
Yeah,
and just not understanding the ethos behind mediation.
yeah.
And then the other big thing that I see that often leads to mediation failing and people then blaming the process rather than the lack of preparedness is people who enter the process without knowing what they're aiming for. They haven't defined success before starting.
Mhm.
And that's really important because otherwise you don't know what you're trying to get to.
Yes, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
and,
No,
and
that's
trying
so
to
powerful.
define success outside of a specific that you're wedded to, but
Yeah.
in general, what are you trying to achieve through this mediation? A lot of people, strangely enough, don't take the time to think that through. And that's a really important thing to have clear in your mind when you're entering that room.
And maybe I think that's really spot on. And maybe that's why a lot of people feel, that they feel frustrated with the mediation process because they're almost hoping that the mediator is going to tell them what the right outcome is.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So whether it's them not, siding or not with the other person, that I think that's something I hear a bit of. But this idea of, oh, I don't feel like we've made much progress because they're hoping that they're going to be guided there, and maybe you're right, they just don't really know what they're actually aiming to, what their goals are.
Yeah. So yeah, I think like anything, if you know what you're entering in and you're clear
Yeah.
about what it requires, you get a
Yeah.
lot more value out of it.
But I think, as a mediator in the hybrid model, you do learn a lot about the individuals that,
Mhm.
because you get that opportunity to sit in the room with them and their lawyer, and hear those discussions, which you aren't privy to, obviously, if you're in the traditional model
Yes.
when you're in the room. So there's always you're slightly detached from what's going on. And that does give you an insight into personalities, psychologies, and as
What really
ever,
matters to them that they're
yeah,
not necessarily
exactly.
voicing.
For sure. But listening is, it's the hardest skill. And I think that is probably in terms of preparation, are you willing to
Yes.
listen? And,
One of the key pillars to negotiation is being able to listen to the other.
yeah. And I think, I suppose, coming back to the roles of, let's just say, I'm sure when you're there or whether the lawyer's there, just asking clients, to consider the perspective of the other person and acknowledge what they've been saying, that
Yep.
is so key and really, really hard to do, I think.
Especially when you're in the middle of all this emotional turmoil, it's helpful to have somebody a bit more cool-headed and in a professional capacity
Yeah,
who's there as well.
definitely. So I
So
think,
Charlotte, I like to end my podcast with a bit of a summary. And the way I usually do that is I ask my guests for 3 tips.
yes.
So in this scenario, for somebody who is considering hybrid mediation, what would be your 3 tips to them?
So I think I would say, I mentioned this already, but the therapeutic support in some form, absolutely essential, because I suppose that goes with any process that someone's engaging in, but that is going to then enable them to fully engage into the hybrid mediation or other form of mediation and have an outlet for their emotions. Because that can be, I think, one of the biggest bars to effectiveness. And indeed, that person can come to the hybrid mediation, but they need, that's just often overlooked, I think.
Yeah.
Um, Preparation always, whether it's, as I say, in that school example, proper research into the schools that the child was going to, or if it's child arrangements, thinking through what the parenting plan might look like, anything that is going to sort of inhibit making progress on the day. So financial disclosure, we don't want to be going to hybrid mediation and someone saying, oh well, I never got this or that form.
Yeah.
how do I know that you're telling the truth? That all needs to be sorted out.
Yeah.
Um, so I think preparation is really, really key. Make the most of the time that you've got because
Yeah.
it's going to be expensive and you want to feel that it's effective. Um, I think good communication between the client and lawyer is really, really key. So
Yeah.
finding a lawyer that you trust,
Hmm.
speak to them about hybrid mediation, whether they're familiar with it, whether they support it, and if they don't, why not? And I guess also linked to that is, looking at the mediator because you need to trust your mediator as well. So
Yes.
speak about them, have a conversation if that's offered, just try and find out a bit, about how they work. So
Hmm.
that, in your hybrid mediation, you've got your team of professionals that you aren't doubting on the day because
Yeah.
you need to feel everyone needs to feel that they're comfortable and trusting of the whole process.
And well
Uh,
supported, I guess. Yeah.
yeah, and that's three, but I've actually got four. I think the other one
Go ahead. Go
is
ahead.
understanding your best and worst case scenarios. Like you said, just feeling understand your goals, but what are your alternatives and making sure that you've really thought that through, if not beforehand, but during the day. And I guess, use your advisors wisely so that,
Yes.
there's no regrets. But also, you can continue the discussion after after the day, as I say.
Yeah.
It's not, you're not suddenly lurched into, a full-on court process if one hybrid mediation session doesn't go well, maybe there's something else out there.
Yeah. Point. Yeah, I mean, I think that last point kind of goes along with the preparation piece. It's that emotional and logistical preparation. And then, of
Yeah.
course, choosing the right professionals to support you through that process, because it's not easy when you're discussing, your life savings, your children, your
Oh,
home,
yeah.
etc.
No, it's quite overwhelming, and I think preparation is definitely underrated.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Charlotte. It's really helpful to understand a bit more in detail how this all works and also how you make it work, because they go hand in hand. So thanks
For
so much,
sure.
Charlotte.
No, great to chat to you. Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.